Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I wanted to talk to you about something you may or may not have heard of, but that is the difference between giving birth in a hospital versus giving birth in a birthing center. Some may feel safest in a hospital, some may prefer a more cozy home-like birth center. Either way, I wish you all the best birth experience possible. Now, caveat, of course, I personally have only given birth in a birth center. However, I did do a rotation on an OB floor in school and I was able to witness 2 live births and 1 emergency C-sections. Although I have been in the hospital and watched births, I have not personally given birth in a hospital. So I wanted to go over kind of 5 main differences between the two and just kind of give you a feel for what you can somewhat expect, or if you're on the fence, or maybe you're just curious in general. So the first main one is really the philosophy of the two places. Put simply, hospitals can tend to be more hands-on and view birth as more of a medical condition, whereas the birth center is more hands-off and view birth as a more natural part of womanhood. In the hospital, there's plenty of studies out there that will show that there are more interventions done in the hospital as well as more interruptions. That's not a bad thing. It's just if that is not exactly your goal for childbirth, I advise you to look into some other options, i.e. birth center. So there's more interventions, more interruptions with those interventions that can really kind of bog down the laboring process. Interventions and interruptions like the nurse coming in, checking your vitals, peeping in to check on you, checking on baby's vitals via the monitor, and also CNAs or techs or whoever else is going to come in and get things for you, adjust things for you. Some people might prefer that, but some people see it as more of interruptions. As someone who's given birth 3 times now, you have to almost get in like the zone where you just kind of block out everything else and you stay focused on yourself and your breathing and your baby. Contrast that with giving birth in the birth center. You will have less interventions, less interruptions to your birthing bubble. I noticed with all my midwives, all 3 of them, they gave me my space and they would come, when things got really intense and the pushing was about to start, but they kind of left me to my own and would ask if I wanted more frequent check-ins or if it was okay with fewer. And I was fine with fewer check-ins. So just keep that in mind. And if you really want to get into the numbers and the nitty-gritty, you can look up the different C-section rates, the different epidural rates, the different episiotomy rates. But hey, I'm not trying to give any hate or shade to anybody. If you want epidural, if you want to do all of those things, then that's fine too. I just wanted to present the information and you can do what you want with that. The second thing I wanted to talk to you about is there's a lot more, kind of going along with the philosophy, there's a lot more restrictions in the hospital. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing. It's just something that they have to do in a hospital because everything has to be following a protocol, if you will. So you're gonna have an IV, you're gonna have the rule of no eating while you're laboring, that only ice chips. If you do decide to get an epidural, that puts your legs out of commission, and of course you'll have to give birth, usually on your back, which if that's what you wanna do, that's fine. But for me personally, I did not feel like on my back was the most comfortable, and that's not the way that I felt my body leading as I was starting to push. I prefer to be on the first one. I actually was kind of on my back, but I was more in a sitting position and I was in a birth tub. And then the second one, I was on all fours. And then the third one, I was back in the tub in that sitting position. Also, with the birth center, you don't have to have an IV. You don't have to restrict your eating, so you can eat as much or as little as you want. I find that I needed to eat to keep up the energy, to keep myself from getting like completely 100% exhausted. Don't get me wrong, giving birth is exhausting, but I didn't want to be tank on empty. So I wanted to eat and refresh myself. So the third thing, and I think the most obvious thing, is the overall appearance. If you give birth in a hospital, it's gonna look like a hospital. If you give birth in a birthing center, you have a bed in the birthing center, a nice big bed, usually a queen where you can really get comfortable. And then of course, after you have the baby, you can relax and hubby can come and sit with you and just relax and enjoy that baby. whereas it's not quite the same in the hospital. Of course, they have hospital beds, so those aren't really known for being the most comfortable, but it gets the job done. So just little differences like that. I've given birth now in 3 different birthing centers. 2 were houses that had been converted into a birthing center, and then the other one was a standalone building that was the offices, and they converted it to a birthing center. All I think were comfortable, and I felt perfectly at home and safe, and that's kind of the difference. Is in the hospital it's a little more sterile and rigid. I guess that's just the vibe or feeling that I get from a hospital, whereas a birth center can be a little more cozy, a little more home-like. You can bring different things to make it more home-like. They just have a little more restrictions again in the hospital. But, you know, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. And the 4th thing, which I think is important definitely in this day and age, is their visitor policy. And I understand, I know why they're doing this. I get it. But it's still nice that I didn't even have to worry about, is my husband going to be able to be with me while I'm giving birth, or is there going to be a really strict visitor policy? And I had my husband with me, I had my daughter with me, and I didn't have to worry or even think about that. And I was able to have anybody who wanted to come and see me after I given birth or during the birth. But in the hospital, they're a little more restrictive of that. So if you have a large family that you're close with, you just have to kind of keep that in mind. And number 5, no one likes to talk about this. It may seem a little crass, but I mean, the bottom line is money is what makes the world go round. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. I just want to put some numbers out there just so you have it. Now, of course, this is generally speaking. It's not necessarily specific to each case, but in general, hospital births cost anywhere between $10,000 and $100,000 if you have to go in for a C-section. So that could be pretty expensive, and depending on your insurance coverage, obviously I don't think you'll be responsible for all of that, but it is a big chunk of change. And if you're like most Americans, or anyone really, you don't just have, you know, an extra 5 or 10 grand laying around somewhere. Compare that to the birth center, where it can depend on the birth center, but it's between 5 and 10,000, and usually your insurance will cover a big chunk of that. The way it worked with me is I think I had 1,000 or 2,000 out of pocket with the birth center, and that's it. And I should also add too that the birth center is all inclusive. So that means your prenatal care, your birth, and your postnatal care, all of that is covered under that. Whereas for the cost for the hospital birth, I'm just talking about the birth, i.e. pushing baby out. That's all it's covering. It's not covering labs or ultrasounds or anything like that. That's only the hospital part. So just FYI. I guess my caveat here too is to be eligible for a birth center, usually you won't be accepted into their care if you're a high risk pregnancy. So just keep that in mind. You know, that's high blood pressure, obesity, diabetes, any other underlying conditions that you may have could negate your eligibility for a birth center. But don't let that stop you. Hospitals actually have come a long way, and I should say that too. Hospitals really have come a long way in trying to make their birthing suites feel more cozy and more at home to help with the laboring process. To finish up, I wanted to kind of put this information out there so that people can have it and make an informed decision. And if you want to do a hospital, that's fine. If you want to do a birth center, that's fine. But I just know this is not something that's talked about a whole lot, and it's definitely a passion of mine. It's just giving women the knowledge and the power to choose what they want to do, how they want to do it. So let me know what you think. Did you find any of this information helpful, or did you find any of this information new altogether that you were just like, whoa, I had no idea? Let me know how your experiences were, and I'll see you next time.